Let's take some plain old pillar candles and turn them into something amazing with Silhouette Studio and the embossing tools that you can use in your Silhouette Curio 2 or Cameo 5 series. Hi, I'm Brenda Lambert. I'm a TJC licensed instructor for Silhouette. You found your way to Silhouette success. If you want to learn all of the tips and tricks about all of the machines and the software, you're going to want to hit the subscribe button below, and don't forget the notification bell so you can stay in the loop. Now, last time we met, we talked all about the embossing feature in Silhouette Studio. We learned all there was to know about it. This video, we're going to take all of that knowledge and put it to work for us so we can complete a project. You can see that the embossing on the vellum paper looks absolutely amazing. It turned out so good. And these candles can be given as little gifts or just used to decorate your home. It's totally up to you. There are a ton of other projects that you can do with the embossing tool and Silhouette, but this is the one we're focusing on today. I do want to put a disclaimer right at the beginning before we even get started that you should not burn these candles with the wrapper on. Vellum is paper, it will burn, and it could be bad. So make sure you follow all of the safety rules if you are lighting the candles. If you're just keeping them for decoration, you are good to go. Now, let's get into it. This is the template that we are going to create in Silhouette Studio for our candle wraps. I wanted to explain a little bit about it at the beginning so that the actual creation of the template will go a little bit quicker. Our basic shape is going to be just a rectangle, and we're going to add the tab and the slot here. The tab will fit in this slot. The area behind this slot is going to be tucked under the rest of the candle wrap. That's going to give us a little bit of wiggle room and ensure that the entire candle is in fact wrapped. This tab is made up of two different parts. We've got a little space here for wiggle room in case our measurements are just a little bit off, and then we have an oval shape welded to that so that it will catch on the slot. The actual circumference of the candle needs to fit in between our slot and the start of our tab. So those are the things that I kept in mind while I was designing this template. Now let's get on to actually making it. We're going to start with a rectangle from the drawing tools. We're going to draw that out. We're not going to pay too much attention to the size right now. We will get everything scaled after it's put together. Now let's grab an arc from our line tools. That's all the way over to the right hand side. We can click on that, click on our design mat and pull that out. And if we click again, we're able to move our cursor up or down to create an arc. And you can see that it shows the angle over on the other side. And then we can click again to release our cursor. Now at this point, you can use your slider to increase or decrease the size of it. And when you have it just about the way you want it, you can right click and convert that to path. Now it's just a single curved line that we can use for our slot. Let's get this rotated around so that the arc is facing over to the left. Again, we want some distance on this side. That looks pretty good. Let's move on to creating the tab now. We're going to start with a rectangle, and we want this rectangle to be smaller than our slot. Let's set this to white and zoom in on it so we can see what we're doing a little bit better. We do want this rectangle to set right in there. We don't want it too small or it's going to wiggle around, but we don't want it to go larger than the actual slot. That looks pretty good. If you want, you can adjust your slot a little bit better at this point in time. You can see where it's at in relation to the rectangle. Now that that's all set up, we can fit this back to the window and bring our slot back over to this side. If you have your smart snapping tools on, you can see when everything is lined up. That is centered both to the main rectangle and to our slot. So that is perfect like that. I am going to pull this out just a little bit and make it wider. We definitely want it to overlap our main rectangle. Now we're going to grab an ellipse from the drawing tools and draw that out. Once again, I'm going to set that to white and zoom in on it so we can get it sized. Now for our oval, we want it just slightly larger than our slot. If it's too big, it's not going to go through the slot, but if it's too small, it's going to go through too easily and it's not going to hold our wrap in place. You can see through the Smart Snapping tool that this is lined up at the top and it does go past the bottom. I think maybe a little bit too much. Let's shrink that down just a tad and that should be okay. We can fit this back to the window. Now we're going to bring our ellipse all the way over and line that up as well. We're going to zoom in on this area now. And for this tab, we want a little bit of space in between the body of our wrap and our oval. That's why we created the rectangle. That might be a little bit too much. So let's select our oval and the rectangle and use our arrow key to set it back just a little bit. Now we can select our template rectangle as well. Right click and weld everything together. Now if you want, you can double click to bring up the editing points and pull this out a bit. And I like to make that editing point a corner and pull the blue nodes in just a little bit so I have more of a pointed tab and it's just easier to fit in the slot that way. Let's fit this back to the window and it looks like our slot has disappeared, but really it's just in the back. So we can right click on the template and send that to back. Now our slot is in place. We can select both of those, right click and group them together. Now it is time to size our template. I have found the easiest way to do this is to grab a rectangle from the drawing tools and pull that out. This is going to be kind of a ruler here. I had mentioned that the circumference of my candle was 6.25 and that is what we want this width set at. My aspect ratio button is unlocked, so I can just enter 6.25 in the box there and we can set this to white so we can see it. Now we want the circumference of the candle to fit in between our slot and this edge of the template. The part of the template behind the slot is going to be tucked underneath this edge, so we have a little bit of play, and the tab is going to be tucked into the slot. So all of this area in here is what is going to cover the circumference of our candle. Let's select our template and just squish it in a little bit, and you can see when I do that our slot has moved a bit. Let's adjust again and pull that in. Now the template should be exactly the right width. We just need to worry about the height. My candle is 1 3/4 inches high. I like my wrap to be just a little bit smaller than that because that leaves a nice little band showing around the top and the bottom. And it's better to have it too short than to have it too tall, because if it's too tall, then it's going to go above the top of the candle and it's just not going to look right. So now our template should be exactly the right size. We're ready to move on to the embossing part of this tutorial. I have brought these floral designs in. They did come from Creative Fabrica, and I'll put a link for them in the description below in case you want to use them and play around with the same file. I do like to create my own designs with different pieces from Creative Fabrica, and you should try to play around with this as well. All I'm doing is taking something that is already made and rearranging it a little bit. I'm cutting the stems off some of these so that they flow nicely together, and it's just a fun way to practice using more features of the software. I think I like the way that looks. I can select all of these, right click and group them together so nothing moves around, and we can work on scaling this down so that it fits within our template. Again, we want to keep in mind the parts that will be covered up. We don't want to lose any of our design. Now we can head up to our send page. Everything is showing as cut lines. We want our floral pattern to be embossed. So let's click on the flowers, click on tool 2, and now we can emboss our flowers and cut the template. I am using this vellum. It came from Michael's. It's Recollections, and this does have some printed areas on it. It's not ideal. I just wanted a plain sheet of vellum, but this is what I had on hand. So I'm going to make sure that my design is placed in the middle, and I'm not going to cut any of this along the edges. The snowflakes are around the edges. I just need to avoid that. Now, I tried several times to get this vellum to stick to my ES bed with the protective mat, and it just was not going to happen. So what I did was, I'm using my adhesive mat, but this is a little bit dirty on the back as well. I do need to replace my mat. So I just took some masking tape and secured it. This is not going to go anywhere. It's going to work just fine. Now let's go back to the software for just a minute and take a look at what's next. Again, I am going to select my design and move it more to the center so that I don't get the snowflakes that are printed around the edge. Now we can go up to the send page, and at this time I just want my template to cut. I'm not embossing right now. We need to switch mats for that. So I have the templates selected for tool 1, and the embossing part is turned off. You can select the embossing pieces and then click on ignore selected lines. I do need to switch my machine over to the Curio 2. Okay, we will be using tool holder 1. My material is set to vellum. The auto blade is detected, and we're going to cut. I'm going to switch back over to the Curio 2 and click on send. The machine goes through and does the auto height adjustment. Then it adjusts the blade to the right depth, and then it will start cutting. So here is our candle wrap. It did cut out the little slot at the end here. So this is going to wrap around, and the tab will tuck in the slot. Now we need to make it pretty. I'm swapping the adhesive mat out for my embossing mat. We're going to talk a little bit about getting that candle wrap placed perfectly so that we emboss in the right area. The first step is to line up these corner marks on your mat with the little marks on the curio. There are 2 lines on each corner. You want them lined up as well as they can be. We're going to go back to Silhouette Studio for a minute, over to the design page, and you can see here that I have set up guidelines. I have one going horizontally and one going vertically. In order to set up your guidelines, you just click on one of the rulers and either pull it down or over to the side, and that will create a guideline. If you decide you don't need that one, you can right click on it and delete. But I have both of my guides set up at the 1-inch mark. Now I can take all of my design and set it right over in this corner, and it's going to snap there so we know it's set in the right place. Now when I go to place my candle wrap on the embossing mat on the Curio 2, I want it exactly at the 1-inch mark, both horizontal and vertical. Let's go over to the send panel. We can select the template and we want to ignore the selected lines on that this time. My design has become ungrouped, so let's select all of these pieces. I'm just holding down my shift key and clicking on them. We can group them together, and we want to use tool 2 for this. You may have noticed that I did not go to the specialty tools panel for this. I just imported it and went straight to the send page. That's because I'm not doing any kind of fill pattern. I'm not doing anything special to this at all. I'm only using the cut lines. If that's the case, you can just go to the send page and use tool 2, and the embossing tool will just run right along the outline of this, just like the auto blade would. There's no extra work needed if you're just doing the outline of a design. Let's click over to tool holder 2. My embossing tool is detected and it is set to auto emboss, but with my material set to vellum, it's giving me the warning that there's no compatible action for this. So let's bring down our drop down menu. I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom and click on Curio to emboss. Now that warning has went away, my design is lit up in blue and this should be good to go. Now we need to work on getting our candle wrapper set in place exactly where we need it. I'm going to use the rest of this vellum sheet to mark the top line. I'm marking off at the 1-inch mark on both sides. I'm just making sure it is even all the way across and exactly at the 1-inch mark. Now I'm going to take my ruler and measure vertically. So this ruler is showing me where the 1-inch mark is here. This paper is showing me where the 1-inch mark is here. And the top left corner of my wrapper has to go right here. Now it is a little bit difficult to see on camera, but the wrapper is there. It is set in exactly the right spot. Now we can go ahead and click on send and send again on the pop-up panel. This is going to go through, again, it's going to auto detect. It does not need to adjust the blade this time, so it's just going to go ahead and get started on the embossing. I do not have this hooked up with the USB cord, so it may pause while it gathers all of the data. Sometimes with the Bluetooth connection, you just have to be patient and wait for it to get going. Now it has started. It may stop a time or two in between, but as long as the Bluetooth connection is not dropped, it should be able to finish up the project. Okay, we've just finished up with the embossing. Let's go ahead and take a look. It is a little bit difficult to see, but when you set it on a darker background, it becomes much more visible. Now let's talk about the accuracy of the placement for just a minute. It did come down all the way to the bottom, but all of the design was captured. It could have been centered top to bottom a little bit better, but we did get all of it on the wrap, which is what we wanted. There is the slot. The embossing did not go past the slot, and it did not go past the end of the wrap over on this end. So all in all, that was a very successful placement, and you just need to take a little bit of time to measure exactly where you need your template set. And you can get an accurate placement of your design. That is one of the benefits of using the Curio 2. With the Cameo 5, you have a few more variables that kind of get in the way. It has to pull the mat in, and it can be off a little bit on the distance that it pulls it in. And you have to feed it in lined up with the marks on the machine, and that could be off to the left or right a little bit as well. If you pay close attention to where you're setting your template on your mat with the Cameo 5, you can get close. I think you can get closer with the Curio 2. There are less variables. You just need to make sure that these notches are lined up with the marks on your mat. These candles came from the set that I had ordered. I have it linked in the description below. They did come in all different colors, and they have a wrap on them now. I'm going to take those off. I wanted to show you the difference the dark background makes when using the vellum and the embossing techniques. When we put this on the white candle, it is still very light. It's very hard to see still. You can see it a little bit better in person, but it's still very faint. Let's take a look at the lighter pink candle. And here you can see that it does show up a little bit better. It's definitely more visible in person than it is on camera. Now we have the dark purple, and you can see when you set it against that purple, it really does pop. It looks amazing, and again, it's even better in person. So when you're choosing your candles, you want to try to go for a darker color, or you can cut a wrapper out of dark colored cardstock, put the wrapper on the lighter candle first, and then cover it with the vellum, the embossed vellum. Now, if you choose to do it that way, you're going to want to make your vellum wrapper slightly longer, not too much. You just want to make up for the added thickness of the cardstock wrapper. I found that it's easiest to go ahead and put that tab in the slot before you put it on the candle. And then you can just slide it down over the candle itself. Again, I did choose to have a little band showing at the top and at the bottom. And you can see the tab through the vellum, but set that to the back, and overall this is absolutely beautiful. I do want to remind you that you should not burn these candles with the wrapper on. If you do plan on burning the candles, take the wrapper off and then light the candles. You want to follow all of the safety protocols when you're burning candles. This is the same design on the light blue. And this will work with any of the pillar candles. You just need to adjust your size in Silhouette Studio before you cut. You've probably caught on by now that these masterclasses are part of a series. They are all linked in the same playlist. So if you have missed any of them, you can go back and watch them easily just by clicking through to that playlist. Next up in the series, we're going to look at heat foiling, and we're going to be using the Portrait 4. We're going all the way from the Curio 2, which is a monster, to the itty bitty Portrait 4. It's a huge change, but it is so much fun to see what all of the different machines can do. I hope you'll tune into that one as well. But for now, go create something amazing, and I'll see you in the next video.